Turtleback is sort of an iconic landscape shape in the islands. You see it from different angles from just about everywhere.
Early explorers used it as a marker to see where they were. It's like being in a maze where you're on the water in these islands. You don't know where you are. Turtleback has been a beacon. It's always been there.
The vista's unique. You're on a truly open, verdant landscape with occasional trees, and you have a foreground that's open, and then the view out is magnificent.
People come from all over the world to see it.
Turtleback Mountain. It's a special place. Known for its distinctive shape, its natural beauty, and coastal habitat, Turtleback rises from Orcas Island in the San Juan Archipelago off the coast of Washington State. Owned privately for decades, Turtleback remained wild and undeveloped. But in 2005, it went up for sale, and development of that land would affect everyone living in the San Juans. There was only one way to save Turtleback, but what would it take for a community to buy a mountain?
A group of us got together and decided this couldn't be developed. So the land bank purchased it. We have a land bank here.
Conservation land banks are rare. It's not a fluke that Orcas Island happened to have one in the right place at the right time. It started with a man named Peter Fisher. After 2 decades of coming up to San Juan Islands for summers, he moved to the islands permanently in 1982.
The big difference for me in the 80s as a resident, as opposed to just a summer-timer, was the feeling of the loss of land, the disappearance of open space on Orcas, and the lack of affordable housing.
Peter began to get involved with local preservation groups on Orcas. He became president of Friends of the San Juans, and then he saw some very successful efforts on Nantucket Island in Massachusetts and brought back to Orcas Island an ambitious idea: a land bank.
The most effective one-sentence description of what the land bank does, that the problem funds the solution.
The problem funds the solution. The land bank would be funded by land buyers. Anyone who purchases property in San Juan County pays a 1% tax. That tax funds the land bank. The land bank uses the money for land conservation and to protect open spaces. It had worked well in Nantucket, even increased property values there, but no one in San Juan County had ever heard of it.
Starting in 84, and especially in 86, 87, 88, 89, as president of Friends of the San Juans, I was talking to every group I could reach, including, I've got the laundry list, the community college and the realtors associations and churches and Kiwanis and, everybody. You just go talk to absolutely everybody. You reach out.
One day, Peter was reaching out to the commissioners of San Juan County.
They were very polite, and at the end of that particular spiel, Tom Cowan turned to me and said, these are great ideas, Peter. He said, good luck, he said. And I thought, what? And I walked out and I thought, what does that mean? That means that even though these might be good ideas, they don't know if anybody else thinks they're a good idea. And then the eureka moment was when I realized I didn't know if anybody else thought these were good ideas. And so then the question came, how could we ever find out?
Peter did his research. His solution was to send a survey to residents. A well-constructed survey would gauge the level of interest about conservation in the San Juans, that is, as long as people participated. In a concerted effort to draw out the highest response, the survey was publicized by mail and in the local paper.
We sent out over 1,000 surveys to 7,000 voters. We want to know what voters thought about land conservation in the San Juans in the future. We got a 72% response rate. That allowed us to analyze the answers and estimate that a majority of voters would probably vote for something like a land bank if it ever came to a vote. And meanwhile, the education and outreach effort about the land bank and other conservation measures had been going on for years through Friends of the San Juans.
Now the stage was set to get the proposal for a land bank on the county ballot, except
in Washington State, there was no law that allowed it to happen, so we had to create that.
That's where County Commissioner Tom Cowan stepped in. If Peter was the visionary, Tom was the political pragmatist. His first step was to tackle the problem of getting the land bank initiative on the ballot.
There was no enabling legislation to even go forward with this, so first thing that had to happen is get state enabling legislation before we could propose it to the county.
Tom realized early on that the initiative wouldn't move forward without the buy-in of the local business community.
I started organizing what I called Saturday breakfasts. We recognized right away that you could expect opposition from the real estate community. So I invited, typically almost half the people were realtors, leaders in realty. And in order to come to an agreement on what would be something that we could, as a community, go forward to the state legislature with, there was a lot of compromises. Nevertheless, at the conclusion of these breakfasts, there had been an agreement by everybody that was there that this is something that's viable, we can all support it and move forward. And I thought that was a great accomplishment.
With that agreement in place, the next step was to go to the state legislature. In 1990, the state enabling legislation passed the House, but when it went to the Senate, it was expected to die there. In a series of political twists, and to the utter surprise of most everyone involved, it was passed by the Senate and unexpectedly landed on the governor's desk.
So the governor said he'd meet with me on a Saturday. This is Governor Booth Gardner. And got in there, and the first words were, "Tom, what is this?"
The state enabling legislation allowed the county to put a land bank ordinance on the ballot. In fact, the legislation allows any county in the state to put a land bank ordinance on the ballot.
And on a Saturday morning, he signed it. It's law. It's done.
And what that meant is that any county in Washington state can ask its voters if it wants to tax land sales 1% and then use that money to buy land. And we are the only county that has a land bank. In 1990, 7 counties went to a vote. It failed in every county.
Except for San Juan County. Tom and Peter agree that the business support was crucial.
And the main reason goes back to those breakfast meetings where we had the support of the leadership of the real estate community.
As a supporter of a land bank, you have to make a business case for it, and you have to publicize that across the community. Otherwise, it will fail.
The citizens of San Juan County passed the land bank ordinance in 1990 and renewed it for another 12-year cycle in 1999. San Juan County Land Bank conserves high-priority open space properties, including natural areas, agricultural lands, and scenic vistas.
Most of the people that move here do it because of the unique nature of the islands, both physically and socially, and that's important to them, and they want to keep it that way.
Another organization, the San Juan Preservation Trust, has been working on keeping it that way since 1979. San Juan Preservation Trust protects open spaces within San Juan Archipelago through the acquisition of conservation easements and properties.
Thus far, we've protected about 14,000 acres, including both conservation easements and properties that we own outright on 19 islands.
That's Tim Seifert, Executive Director of the Preservation Trust. He explains that, unlike the Land Bank, the Preservation Trust's funding comes from a completely different source.
We are pretty much 100% privately funded. The money that we raise, with a few exceptions, comes from private individuals that have a stake in the San Juan Islands.
In the beginning, much of the land trust property was donated, but things started changing for the trust in the 21st century.
Until 2002, I think something like 97% of the acres that we protected came in the way of donations. And we're blessed in that we have a great demographic here and some landowners that want to do the right thing, and those continue to come to us. But since 2002, about 60% of the property that we've protected in acreage has been through acquisition. That means purchases.
Their biggest purchasing opportunity, one the trust had long been waiting for, came up in 2005. Turtleback Mountain, 1,578 acres, came on the open market. Tim already knew the mountain pretty well.
I was a kid. I used to climb around up there, and I knew that this was an important place for the community. And when I first started this job, somebody who started the organization told me, Turtleback someday is going to come, and if it comes on your watch, you better do it. You better take care of it.
Everyone on Orcas sees Turtleback Mountain every day. Aside from its cultural and aesthetic beauty, it's home to a diverse ecosystem of wetlands, grasslands, and wildflower prairies. The mountain supports a rich variety of wildlife and over 220 plant species.
And so it was a big deal when it came, but of course the price tag that came with it was frightening.
$18 million, full market price. The Preservation Trust could come up with maybe $2 million, but they put in a full price bid anyway.
Our bid was accepted on the condition that we could raise the money in a small and a very tight time frame, and we had a developer who was competing with us on that.
The developer planned to build several large estates ringing the mountaintop, and that struck at the heart of the local community. The trust had a daunting task ahead.
If you're looking at $18 million and you've really only got $2 million in the bank, that's a huge leap. So We had all sorts of contingency plans. We talked about developing half the mountain if we had to save the priority pieces of it. We had all sorts of contingency plans, but we ultimately stepped into a board meeting where I wasn't sure I had the votes to move forward. And as literally, as I was about to step into the meeting, a phone call came from the Trust for Public Land in Seattle, who were gathered around a conference table down in Seattle, their leadership, and they called up and while we've been courting them for months to try and get them involved in this project, they hadn't shown any interest. They asked a few questions. They asked about the purchase and sale agreement that we'd entered into with the seller, and then they, right there on the spot, said, "We will support you with your fundraising effort." Well, that support turned my board. I walked in and I said, I just got off a call. Trust for Public Lands is willing to partner with us. And just the credibility that national organization brought to that effort, put my board in support of it.
That was the turning point. After that meeting, the Preservation Trust approached the San Juan County Land Bank.
They did an amazing job. I think they started out at saying they're in for $6 million, and little by little, through Lincoln Borman, who's the director over there, he cajoled his commission to little by little increase that to $10 million.
$10 million was more than a major boost to the campaign. Here's Land Bank Director Lincoln Borman.
For us, the project was relatively straightforward in that we figured out how much money we could put towards it, and we could access those funds. We had to bond against future revenue to do it, but we could come up with the $10 million that we ultimately put into the project.
Even though the land bank came up with the lion's share of the purchase price, Lincoln says there's no way the purchase could have happened without the joint cooperation of the privately supported Preservation Trust and the publicly funded land bank.
We had done a few projects together, but nothing like a regular arrangement of partnering on who's going to end up with what interest in the piece of property, who's going to manage it, who's going to contribute what toward it. So at the same time we were doing the Turtleback transaction, it was basically building a partnership with the Preservation Trust, a functional partnership. So we did a lot of things together while we were doing that project. We benefited from the legal counsel that they hired. They benefited from having our cash on hand and having a partner in the negotiations as well. The key here for that project, and the reason it succeeded, was because we were able to partner with the Preservation Trust.
Together, the Preservation Trust and the Land Bank came up with over $12 million. But they still needed $6 million more to meet their monumental goal. They turned to the local community.
It was the first time the entire community, meaning the whole county, kind of rallied around a specific conservation project. And that's just very unusual because each island has its own distinct culture. So for people on San Juan to get excited about Turtleback or Lopez, it was pretty special.
The community they just came out of the woodwork. We had girls selling a little bake sale in front of the grocery store, sending us a check for $15. We had locals were holding events in their homes that we didn't even know about, and we would receive support from that. We spent a lot of time on that mountain with a lot of people, not letting them off the mountain until they coughed up some money.
At one point, the decision was to have a big fundraiser right there in Crow Valley looking at Turtleback, and they planned for 700 people. 1,200 people came, the biggest single gathering on Orcas Island in history.
My wife and I went over to this big fundraiser on a farm for Turtleback, and when we pulled over the hill, I'd never seen as many people at any one time in this county. There are hundreds and hundreds, and not thousands of people that had come to this fundraiser for Turtleback, and that was the moment that I knew that this was going to happen. You could just feel it come together. It's just unbelievable. That was a real moment to say, my God, we're actually going to save Turtleback Mountain.
The purchase of Turtleback Mountain elevated the land bank to a new level of expectation. County Commissioner Tom Cowan says it also imposed a new focus.
It's totally influenced our whole direction because of the enormous cost and and management of it. One of the things that land bank builds in is a strong stewardship component. So that's a very big deal too.
Tim Seifert says it's a big deal because the mountain is so big.
That's part of the reason we love our partnership with the land bank, because the land bank's has been willing to take on some of these large stewardship efforts, and they didn't do so lightly. That was a huge property for them.
$500,000 was designated for stewardship of Turtleback Mountain, and it'll be used to keep things pretty much the way they are. Lincoln Borman explains.
Our approach really is in trying to preserve the resource and provide an opportunity for the public to get out on the property in a minimally impactful way.
That means no motorized vehicles, no hunting, no campgrounds.
In essence, what we do is create trailheads, maintain trails, and then keep tabs on what people are up to when they're on the mountain. If we were a state park, we'd have more infrastructure requirements, obviously, but we'd also have more staff.
There's just one part-time steward for all the land bank properties on Orcas, including Turtleback. Fortunately, community support is still strong.
We also have a very dedicated core group of volunteer stewards, and we have been making a lot of use of volunteers, and that's a program that's really taken off in the past, say, 2 or 3 years.
In fact, there are 5 times more volunteers now than there were in 2008. While volunteering has gone up, land bank income has gone down because fewer people are buying property and paying the 1% tax that funds the land bank. Amanda Jesus is the chair of the Land Bank Commission.
We bonded out to 2014 to cover the purchase of Turtleback Mountain. And as a consequence, we have large payments for that bond and very low real estate sales in the county in the last couple of years. So we have to be very careful of where we're spending our money right now.
Even though paying off the bond is the main focus now, the land bank is looking ahead and setting its future goals.
We have a lot of still some large estate type properties that we would like to acquire. We would like to get more shoreline property on Orcas. It's amazing for an island how little public shoreline is available on Orcas Island. That's a high priority. We would like to protect more farmlands, particularly here in San Juan Valley and also on Lopez. So those are kind of our main priorities.
And for right now, Lincoln Borman says they've had to get creative.
We're looking constantly to try and find partners and other sources of funding, try and do things which don't cost as much money. So we've gotten into some new areas like trail easements, where we're looking at donated trail easements and trying to help create a trail system for San Juan Island and on Orcas and Lopez as well.
The Preservation Trust has had to adapt to changing times too. For the last several years, they'd been concentrating on buying land.
That has been extremely difficult in this last year to raise money to purchase it. We have so what we've done is we do have an acquisition fund with $2 million. It's not restricted, and we'll use that money to leverage partnerships or public money if we can find it to try and accomplish as much as we can with as little as we have. But frankly, in the San Juan Islands, $2 million can be eaten up by one relatively small property in a heartbeat. So we're guarding our resources very closely. We're just choosing properties right now that are projects that we can leverage that money, and we're focusing on our landowners and donations.
While the Preservation Trust looks for donations, the fate of the land bank is in the hands of the public. San Juan County voters will decide by 2014 if they should reauthorize the land bank. Lincoln Borman says what they've achieved so far makes a strong case for the future.
I think we've done a lot just by the things we've accomplished in this last period. And we want to continue making progress, which is hard, not having the resources, but we're finding ways to keep doing that. So that people see that we're active and they see the projects that we're continuing to do and they benefit from those things. So it's an ongoing benefit that they see, and they understand there's more out there that could be made available to them.
Both the Land Bank and the Preservation Trust are focused on the long term. Tim Seifert says keeping the public involved is vital.
We don't do auctions and we don't do things. We basically get people out on the land. We bring music and we make it a fun time and and a place with a beautiful view. And that's what we found to be the most successful for us, is getting people outside and getting them out on the property.
In a world fraught with the effects of a changing environment, connecting to the land is reaffirming. Because San Juan Islanders have accepted the costs, they continue to reap the benefits of preserving open spaces and important places. The Turtleback's success was based on a partnership that helped them overcome the odds, and they plan to build on that. So while things are uncertain now, the heroes of this story are looking at the big picture.
The likelihood is that the country will endure, the state will endure, the county will endure for a long period of time. And the challenge for us, I think, is to think through this crisis situation to what the picture is going to be in 50 years or 100 years. Chances are we'll have significantly more people. Property will still be very valuable, and with more people out here, it's going to be increasingly important to have places for them to go, to take solace or get away from it all, or hang out with their friends, or just places to look at as they drive by.
The promise of a green environment, a balanced ecosystem, and coexistence of nature and development are at the heart of the island community. Every day in San Juan County, Turtleback Mountain stands as a powerful reminder that each person has an impact on the future.
Oh, it's an all dream come true. Imagine.
It's a big deal. So it's one of those things that we every time we're struggling with the problems that it creates, we just have to kind of sit back and smile and say, wait a second, we got it.
I mean, look what we've done here, look at this place. This is as good as it gets.
Every once in a while I'll go up just to remind myself why I do what I do.
Oh, you win some and you lose some in this game. Turtleback is a victory. It's a gigantic victory.
It's a victory that says through cooperative effort, insurmountable obstacles can be overcome. The impossible can be made possible.